It wasn't just another American fighter. It was the weapon that would destroy Japanese naval aviation forever. On June 19, 1944, when those dark blue Hellcats dove through our formations with devastating precision, every Japanese pilot in the sky knew the age of the Zero was over. The F6F Hellcat didn't just outclass the legendary Mitsubishi A6M Zero, it hunted it methodically. 6 50-caliber Browning machine guns harmonized to converge at the perfect killing range, armor plating that made the aircraft brutally hard to kill, and the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, 2,000 horsepower, pushing the Hellcat to roughly 380 miles per hour and giving it a climb rate over 2,500 feet per minute. What happened that day over the Philippine Sea wasn't a battle. It was an execution. In what American pilots would call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Imperial Japanese Navy lost hundreds of aircraft, while American losses were only a fraction of that. This is the story of how the F6F Hellcat became the most successful fighter aircraft in naval history, and how it crushed the once invincible Zero in the most decisive carrier battle ever fought. The path to that decisive day began on June 6, 1944, as Task Force 58 sorted from Majuro Harbor in the Marshall Islands. It took 5 full hours for the final ship to clear the lagoon. The largest carrier force ever assembled was heading for the Marianas. Vice Admiral Mark A. Mitscher, pioneering aviator and master of carrier warfare, commanded this massive armada from his flagship, USS Lexington. 15 fast carriers, 7 battleships, 21 cruisers, 69 destroyers, a force spread across miles of open ocean. The carriers alone embarked 956 aircraft, and nearly half of them were F6F Hellcats. Task Force 58 was organized into 4 task groups, each capable of independent operation. Task Force 58.1, under Rear Admiral Joseph J. Jocko Clark, included carriers such as Hornet, Yorktown, Belleau Wood, and Baton. Task Force 58.2, under Rear Admiral Alfred E. Montgomery, included Bunker Hill, Wasp, Monterey, and Cabot. Task Force 58.3, under Rear Admiral John W. Reeves, included Enterprise, Lexington, Princeton, and San Jacinto. Task Force 58.4, under Rear Admiral William K. Harrell, included Essex, Langley, and Cowpens. Against this, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa could muster 9 carriers with roughly 430 aircraft. His first mobile fleet included the new carrier Taiho as his flagship, the Pearl Harbor veterans Shokaku and Zuikaku, and a collection of lighter carriers, Junyo, Hiyo, Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho. But the numbers told only part of the story. Most of Ozawa's pilots were inexperienced replacements with less than 100 hours of training. Some had as little as 50 hours total flight time. Many had never fired their guns in training due to ammunition shortages. They were flying into combat against American pilots who often averaged 300 to 400 hours, plus extensive gunnery practice and carrier qualification. On June 11, 1944, Task Force 58 began its assault on the Marianas. Fighter sweeps and bombing raids hit Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The Japanese were caught off guard. They expected the next American target to be farther south. Only a limited number of land-based aircraft defended the Marianas. In the first major sweep alone, Hellcats destroyed dozens of Japanese aircraft. The systematic destruction of Japanese air power had begun. Among the American pilots was Commander David McCampbell, commanding Air Group 15. McCampbell, an Alabama native, had once struggled to qualify in gunnery. His pilots quietly helped him get through those early hurdles. Now he was on the verge of becoming the Navy's all-time leading ace. On June 15th, American forces landed on Saipan. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, immediately activated Operation A-Go. This was Japan's last chance to fight the decisive carrier battle it had sought since Midway. Every available ship and aircraft would be committed. The plan relied on Ozawa's carrier aircraft working in conjunction with land-based planes from Guam and Tinian, plus the advantage of longer Japanese aircraft range. Japanese strike aircraft could attack from beyond the range of American planes, land on Guam to refuel and rearm, then strike again. But the Americans had advantages Ozawa did not fully appreciate. Task Force 58's radar could detect incoming raids at long range. Fighter directors inside each carrier's combat information center could vector Hellcats into perfect intercept positions. American anti-aircraft fire, guided by radar and improved fuses, would shred any aircraft that slipped through. And most importantly, the F6H Hellcat had been designed for one purpose: to kill Zeros. The morning of June 19th began with pre-dawn preparations. His first mobile fleet included the new carrier Taiho as his flagship, the Pearl Harbor veterans Shokaku and Zuikaku, and a collection of lighter carriers, Junyo, Hiyo, Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho. But the numbers told only part of the story. Most of Ozawa's pilots were inexperienced replacements with less than 100 hours of training. Some had as little as 50 hours total flight time. Many had never fired their guns in training due to ammunition shortages. They were flying into combat against American pilots who often averaged 300 to 400 hours, plus extensive gunnery practice and carrier qualification. On June 11, 1944, Task Force 58 began its assault on the Marianas. Fighter sweeps and bombing raids hit Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The Japanese were caught off guard. They expected the next American target to be farther south. Only a limited number of land-based aircraft defended the Marianas. In the first major sweep alone, Hellcats destroyed dozens of Japanese aircraft. The systematic destruction of Japanese air power had begun. Among the American pilots was Commander David McCampbell, commanding Air Group 15. McCampbell, an Alabama native, had once struggled to qualify in gunnery. His pilots quietly helped him get through those early hurdles. Now he was on the verge of becoming the Navy's all-time leading ace. On June 15th, American forces landed on Saipan. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, immediately activated Operation A-Go. This was Japan's last chance to fight the decisive carrier battle it had sought since Midway. Every available ship and aircraft would be committed. The plan relied on Ozawa's carrier aircraft working in conjunction with land-based planes from Guam and Tinian, plus the advantage of longer Japanese aircraft range. Japanese strike aircraft could attack from beyond the range of American planes, land on Guam to refuel and rearm, then strike again. But the Americans had advantages Ozawa did not fully appreciate. Task Force 58's radar could detect incoming raids at long range. Fighter directors inside each carrier's combat information center could vector Hellcats into perfect intercept positions. American anti-aircraft fire, guided by radar and improved fuses, would shred any aircraft that slipped through. And most importantly, the F6H Hellcat had been designed for one purpose: to kill Zeros. The morning of June 19th began with pre-dawn preparations.
In VF-16's ready room aboard Lexington, Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vraciu checked his board and gear. Already an ace, Vraciu had spent months flying as wingman to Edward Butch O'Hare, learning from the Navy's first ace. Now he was about to have the most spectacular day of his career. At 7:45 a.m., the submarine USS Albacore fired a spread of torpedoes at Ozawa's flagship, Taiho. A Japanese aviator spotted the wakes and deliberately crashed into one torpedo, destroying it. But another struck Taiho near the forward elevator area. The damage seemed minor at first. It wasn't. Ruptured fuel lines released deadly aviation gasoline vapors into the ship. A fatal damage control mistake, using ventilation to clear fumes, spread those vapors throughout the carrier. Hours later, Taiho would explode and sink with heavy loss of life. At 8:30 a.m., radar operators across Task Force 58 detected the first Japanese strike wave. 69 aircraft launched at maximum range. Hellcats already airborne climbed for altitude advantage. Those on deck scrambled to launch. The professional killing machine of American naval aviation swung into action. Hellcats from multiple carriers converged on the Japanese formation, guided by controllers who could see the entire battle unfold on radar. The Japanese pilots maintained tight formation, flying straight and level toward their targets. It was their first and fatal mistake. They came in like a parade, and the Hellcats cut them to pieces. Commander McCampbell led Hellcats at high altitude when he spotted enemy aircraft below. He rolled into a high-side run. His guns converged. A Japanese dive bomber burst apart. The slaughter had begun. That morning, McCampbell shot down multiple enemy aircraft, and later, over Guam, he would add even more victories, finishing the day with a legendary total. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Vraciu had his own problem, a supercharger malfunction. Unable to keep altitude with his squadron, he turned back toward the task force. Then he saw them, a large formation of Japanese dive bombers heading straight for the American ships. What happened next became legend. They were so thick, Vraciu later recalled, I felt like a kid with a plate of cookies, afraid someone else would take some. In just minutes, with astonishing marksmanship and minimal ammunition, he shot down 6 enemy dive bombers. When he landed, he climbed out still wearing his gear, held up 6 fingers for photographers, and grinned. That image became iconic. Only afterward did he notice something terrifying. The wingfold pins were not fully secured. He had flown his greatest mission with wings only partially locked. The first wave was annihilated. Most never reached the carriers. Those who did return brought panic and disbelief. Hellcats everywhere, diving from above, attacking from the sides, always faster, always better armed. The second wave launched around 9 a.m. and met an even worse fate. By now, every Hellcat in Task Force 58 was either airborne or ready to launch. Radar plots were precise. The Japanese flew into a wall of interceptors positioned at ideal altitudes. Fighting squadrons posted spectacular totals. Some American pilots became aces in a single day. Hellcats dove from high altitude into masses of Japanese aircraft, thousands of feet below, their 6 guns blazing. The technical superiority of the Hellcat was overwhelming. Where the Zero was built light, the Hellcat was built to survive. Armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, structural strength. The Zero pilot sat behind thin metal. The Hellcat pilot sat behind armor, protected by bullet-resistant glass. A single incendiary hit could turn a Zero into a torch. A Hellcat's tanks could seal and keep going. The engine difference was decisive.
The Hellcat's R-2800 produced around 2,000 horsepower, and even more with emergency power. The Zero's engine produced barely over 1,000. The Hellcat could outclimb, outdive, and outrun the Zero across the envelope where combat happened. And then there were the guns. 6 50-caliber Browning M2s, each with deep ammunition reserves, harmonized to converge at a specific range, creating a cone of destruction. Long bursts, heavy streams, a lethal pattern where all 6 lines of fire met. The Zero's cannon shells were powerful, but ammunition was limited. Zero pilots had to be careful. Hellcat pilots could stay on the trigger and walk tracers into the target. Wave after wave collapsed. A third wave became disoriented and largely failed to find the American fleet. A fourth wave met the same fate as the first. Some American pilots later admitted they almost felt sorry for their opponents. The Japanese were brave, but they were inexperienced and trapped in tactics that made them easy prey. Even in a turkey shoot, the Americans paid a price. Good pilots were lost. Luck still mattered, and war always collected its debt. But by midday on June 19th, the outcome was already clear. The Japanese had thrown hundreds of carrier aircraft into battle. The overwhelming majority would never return. American losses were small by comparison, and many were accidents rather than combat shootdowns. The ocean around Task Force 58 was littered with burning wreckage, oil slicks, and Japanese pilots drifting in life rafts. Mitscher, watching from Lexington, turned to his staff. "The Japanese carrier air force has been destroyed," he said. "They'll never recover from this." He was right. Japan had lost not just aircraft, but irreplaceable pilots. Carriers could be repaired, new airframes could be built, but trained carrier aircrew could not be regenerated in time. The afternoon saw continued action over Guam and nearby islands as American fighters caught Japanese aircraft attempting to land and refuel. Maintenance crews worked miracles. Damaged Hellcats were repaired overnight. Fuel, ammunition, and spare parts arrived in staggering quantities. American carriers had machine shops capable of manufacturing parts. Engines were swapped in hours. The Japanese, meanwhile, cannibalized damaged aircraft and struggled with fuel shortages, spare parts shortages, and collapsing training pipelines. As the sun set on June 19th, Ozawa still believed he might salvage something. He did not yet understand the scale of the disaster. Returning pilots claimed massive victories. In reality, they had achieved almost none. Survivors were exhausted, shaken by the realization that the air war had changed permanently. June 20th brought the second phase of the battle, the American counterstrike. Search planes hunted all day. Late in the afternoon, the Japanese fleet was finally located at extreme range. Launching so late meant American aircraft would return after dark, but Mitscher did not hesitate. Launch them. Task Force 58 launched a massive strike, Hellcats, dive bombers, and torpedo planes, flying to the absolute limit of their endurance. The attack was confused but effective. Japanese ships were hit and damaged. At least one carrier was sunk. Others were left burning or crippled. But the real drama came on the return flight. Darkness fell. Fuel ran out. The radio filled with desperate calls. One by one, aircraft ditched in the sea. Then Mitscher made one of the most famous decisions of the war. Despite submarine danger, he ordered the fleet illuminated. Turn on the lights. Across Task Force 58, carriers and escorts lit up. Searchlights pointed skyward, deck lights blazing. It was like a city floating in the middle of the Pacific. For pilots returning on fumes, it was salvation. Aircraft landed on any deck they could find. Some crashed, some slid off the end. Destroyers raced to pull survivors from the water. Many aircraft were lost, but countless pilots were saved. And in war, trained pilots mattered more than metal. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was over. In 2 days, the Japanese had lost roughly 600 aircraft, multiple carriers, and, most importantly, nearly all remaining trained carrier pilots.
American losses were far lower, and many aircraft were lost to fuel exhaustion rather than enemy fire. The Hellcat's dominance was no accident. Its specifications tell the story. The F6F3 had armor around the cockpit and critical systems, self-sealing tanks that could absorb punishment, a bullet-resistant windscreen, a powerful, reliable engine that could keep running even when damaged, a propeller matched to deliver climb and acceleration, a gun installation designed for sustained, accurate fire, and a cockpit designed for combat, stable, predictable, and forgiving. Unlike the Zero, which demanded constant attention to remain perfectly trimmed, the Hellcat could be flown with confidence, freeing the pilot to fight. Grumman produced Hellcats in enormous numbers. Parts were standardized and interchangeable. Maintenance was efficient. Repairs were fast. By contrast, Japanese production struggled. Material shortages, fuel shortages, declining quality, and hand-built inconsistencies. Even the fuel told the story. American carriers ran high-octane aviation fuel, refined for maximum performance. The Japanese increasingly relied on lower-quality fuel, reducing power and increasing mechanical failures. American pilots could push engines to combat power. Japanese pilots risked engine failure by demanding too much. And behind every Hellcat was a vast logistics system: fuel by the million gallons, spare parts by the ton, replacement aircraft flowing forward, and service squadrons capable of heavy repair at advanced bases. It was industrial warfare at a scale Japan could not match. But the human factor remained decisive. American pilots knew they were flying the best fighter in the world. They trusted their training, their aircraft, and their leadership. They believed that if they went down, rescue would come. Japanese pilots knew they were flying inferior aircraft with minimal training against a superior enemy. Being shot down often meant death. The psychological impact was devastating. The Hellcat didn't just defeat Japanese naval aviation physically, it broke its spirit. Post-war analysis confirmed the scale of victory. The Hellcat's kill ratio wasn't propaganda. It was reality, documented in the records of both sides. And the Hellcat continued its dominance throughout the war, piling up victories and establishing American air superiority wherever it flew. Looking back, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was more than a battle. It was vindication of the American approach to war. While Japan clung to the idea that individual warrior spirit could overcome material disadvantage, the United States embraced industrial warfare, technology, training, organization, and overwhelming production. The Hellcat was the perfect expression of that reality. Tough, powerful, reliable, and available in numbers that turned the sky into an American domain. Commander David McCampbell would later put it simply: the Hellcat was an honest airplane. It did what you asked it to do. It brought you home. In combat, that's all that matters. As the sun set on June 19, 1944, Japanese carrier aviation was finished as an effective force. The survivors, limping back to their decks, knew they had met their master in the F6F Hellcat. The dark blue fighter with the white star had ended the myth of Japanese air superiority forever. In a single day, American industry, training, and technology triumphed over Japanese courage. And the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot became the most brutal demonstration of air supremacy in carrier warfare history.